let's move to the front of the bike and look at the front wheel. What do we have? Well, obviously the stock wheel and this are very different. On a Carrozzeria, it's lighter. So what does that mean? Well, that's a lot of things. One, there's going to stop a lot faster because this wheel isn't turning so hard. There's not that much weight to try and stop. Secondly, lever pressure is going to be diminished because you're going to stop faster, so you don't need as much braking force. Thirdly, that means your brake markers are going to have to change. That means your timing is going to have to change, and so there's going to be a big learning curve in how to brake with this front wheel. Now, in terms of brake rotors, you can see we have our stainless stock rotors in place. It doesn't preclude you from going aftermarket with rotors with something like Galfer's Wave Rotors or their Superbike rotors. You can use any brand you like, in fact. Now, with the front wheel off and the stock wheel next to it, we can see obviously very little in the way of visual differences immediately. And that makes a lot of sense because the stock rotors fit the Carrozzeria wheel. But there are some differences that I'd like to point out that are important for you to realize in terms of when you put the wheel on, what to look for. The stock wheel has two spaces that fit either side of the wheel that the axle goes through. Now with the Carrozzeria wheel, you can reuse those spaces, which is fine. So you just take them off, put them into place, and go ahead and mount up. The front wheel is directional. We have an arrow right here which tells you which way to put the wheel in. Please do not make that mistake. You can't get the rear wrong, but you could get the front wrong. And then lastly, in terms of wheel bearings, we talked about it with the rear wheel. They're much bigger. How much bigger? Well, look at the size of that. It's substantial. And then when we put the stock spacer over it, let's hold that up. You can see it's substantially bigger than the bearing that's in the front wheel. Now that helps a lot because it takes a lot more load off the axle. So a bigger bearing really helps. Now, you can also ask specifically from Carrozzeria for their race kit installation on the front wheel. You could also get that later on if you want to do it. So the race kit will help you. They're all hard anodized, so it's a lot more durable. Up to you which way you go. A little more money gets you the race kit insert, and they will pre-build that before sending the wheels out to make sure that that's all done. Or you just buy the wheel, use your stock rotors, use the stock spacers, and you're ready to go. Now, when you get the wheel, you obviously have to put the rotor on, and the rotor of your choice at that point. So you have to extract the brake rotor bolts. In this case, they're Torx bits. Pull them out, clean all the Loctite off, and do that with the wire brush. And then you want to go ahead and use a tiny bit of blue Loctite putting them in. The 6 rotor bolts we have here for our stock setting, and in this case with our R1, it's 22 foot-pounds. So we'll go ahead and keep that. For your bike, make sure you check the application, check your book, make sure you get the right torque setting. Now when you mount the front wheel, go through the precise process of doing that. Putting the wheel in, putting the brake calipers on. In this case with the R1, we have dowel pins that locate it. So go ahead and fasten up the calipers and torque the bolts to their correct setting. Then go ahead, tighten the axle bolt through to the axle, hand tighten it, and then bounce the front end. Make sure that the free leg, which is this leg, moves and gets itself straight, and then lastly tighten up the pinch bolts. And then finally, with Carrozzeria wheels with a much bigger wheels bearings, you have to do half the torque. So the front axle bolt is 66 foot-pounds in the manual, therefore we're going to do 33. Make sure when you are done, you spin the wheel and hit the brakes. Because there's nothing worse than going out into the first corner down the hot pit and realizing you have no brakes. It's not a good feeling. So make sure before you go on the track, you pump both front and rear brakes, and then you're ready to go out on track.